Hello and welcome to my video about raspiBackup, a tool which allows to create a backup of your running Raspberries on a reliable way, periodically, automatically, and without any user intervention. Just install raspiBackup, configure it, and you have a backup whenever you need one. So that's what I'd like to talk about the next couple of minutes. Most of the time in this video I will talk about raspiBackup, give you an introduction and overview. And then at the end I will visit the most important web pages about raspiBackup. There are a lot of pages available, a lot of information available, but I will point you to the most important ones so you will be able to start raspiBackup quite quickly. Next I will visit GitHub. This website is used to manage the versioning of raspiBackup, the code, and it's also used to track questions and answers, and also to track issues. So whenever you have any questions, just create an issue and ask your question. I will answer. And well, nobody is perfect. It's possible raspiBackup has also some issues. Then create one, report the issue, and I will work on the issue and hopefully we'll be able to fix the issue. And last but not least, I want to give you a live demo of the installation of raspiBackup by using the menu-driven installer. So that's raspiBackup in a nutshell. You create backups of a running Raspberry, so you don't have to stop your Raspberry, and use standard Linux backup tools like dd, tar, and rsync to create the backup. You can save any number of backups and keep any number of backups and decide which type and number you want to save. So for example, you can have 10 DD backups, 5 tar backups, and 100 rsync backups, or I don't know, up to you. Actually, it doesn't make sense to have a backup tool which is not able to restore the backup, so raspiBackup indeed is also able to restore these backups created by the tool. And last but not least, I want to mention that raspiBackup is creating a full backup in contrast to other people who prefer to just save their configuration data, and in case they have to restore the system, install a new operating system, install all the services and so on, and finally actually then restore the configuration data. I think this is not a very useful way to save backup, because you need a lot of time to restore the backup. If you create a backup, a full backup, then this full backup is consistent and you can just restore it. Don't have to fiddle with all the configuration nits and grits you have on your system and have to remember what you actually did in the past. Just restore everything and you will be done in, depends on the size of your root system, between 30 or 60 minutes. And then you will be able to start up your Raspberry again and everything will be fine. If you use an rsync backup, actually only the first backup will be a full backup, and any following backups then will be an incremental backup because of the way rsync works, and because of the fact that rsync also uses hard links, you also will save a lot of backup space. So that's the way I suggest to use rsync for backup all the time. So that's an overview picture of raspiBackup with the most with the components used and parts used. On the left side you actually have the Raspberry you want to backup. The Raspberry has an SD card which usually has the root and boot partition, but you're also able to export the root partition and use an external root partition which is stored on a flash drive, SSD, USB disk, or something else. Both of these components, the SD card and the external root partition, is saved by raspiBackup. If you use tar or rsync backup, if you use a DD backup, then only the SD card will be saved. So next, talk about the targets of your backup, where you can store your backups. It's possible just to use a flash drive on SSD disk or other USB disk. That's the target I suggest to use whenever you start to use raspiBackup, because it takes some time to get familiar with the configuration, and so whenever you use a local backup device, the backup will be created very fast. Because if you use backup space residing somewhere in the network by using Samba or sys or NFFs, then this will take much longer. But finally, I suggest to use a network backup space, because that's the most variable way to save backups. We have 3 different backup types. So you can either use DD to create a backup. Actually, this only creates a backup of the SD card. And this is a one-to-one image, and the benefit of this backup type is that you can restore it with Windows, either by using Windows 32 Disk Imager, Rufus, or Etcher. And well, so there are a lot of people actually who want to do it on Windows, so it's up to you to decide to use a DD backup. I frankly suggest to use an rsync backup, because that's the most flexible and fastest way to create a backup. In addition, you are also able to restore a DD backup with raspiBackup running on a Raspberry on a Linux system, because that's what you have to use whenever you want to restore a tar backup or an rsync backup. These backup types cannot be restored on the Windows systems. There are other protocols, by the way. I forgot to talk about this, to save your backup data, but I will talk about this then later on. So, as I said, you need a Raspberry whenever you have a tar backup or an rsync backup, or actually you need a Linux system. But the easiest way to restore a backup is just by using a Raspberry. I suggest to create an SD image running Raspbian, and whenever you have to restore a backup, just insert this SD card in your Raspberry, boot up the system, insert an SD card writer in your Raspberry, insert the new SD card to get the restored image, start raspiBackup, grab the backup, restore it on the SD card, and you're fine. Okay, so now let's talk about the backup methods and modes. I already told you that actually 2 parts are saved, the SD card and the external root file system, if you don't use a DD backup. And you can use either DD, tar, or rsync, and use different numbers to keep different versions of the different types. I didn't talk about the backup modes. raspiBackup supports the normal mode, which is actually the Raspbian mode, because raspiBackup assumes you have 2 partitions, the boot and root partition, and then just saves and restore these 2. If you have more than 2 partitions, you have to use the partition-oriented mode. A lot of people, no, I wouldn't say a lot of people. There were people who asked for this feature because they are using Noops, and Noops has more than 2 partitions. And so I added this feature to raspiBackup. And people who also use Raspbian with more than 2 partitions also have to use this mode because the normal mode only supports 2 partitions. There's one drawback of this partition-oriented backup. You cannot save any external root file system, and there's also no automatic root file system adjustment. What does this mean? Actually, if you create a backup of an SD card, well, let's say, which has 16 gigabytes of size, and you want to restore it to an SD card of 32 gigabytes, no problem, this will work. And raspiBackup will automatically extend the root file system so that the whole SD card will be used by the, well, not by the root file system, but every additional space on the 32 gigabytes will be used for the root file system. This also works vice versa. So if you have an SD card and a backup of a disk SD card of 32 gigabytes and want to restore it on a 16 gigabyte SD card, this also will work. raspiBackup will shrink the partition, the root partition, accordingly and restore the data, but restore actually will fail if you have more than 16 gigabytes data on your 32 gigabyte SD card. So, but if you have it smaller, it will work. Let's talk about the backup targets. I already explained you can define the number of backups per backup type. And I already mentioned all the different network partitions you can use. There are other partitions which you can use, and particularly the dev FS file system or WebDev, the SFTP file system, the SSH file system. Actually, whichever device can be mounted on Linux can be used in the backup space. A lot of people also use a Synology or any other NAS server to keep and receive their backups. These systems usually also use Samba and or NFS and allow to save the data. I frankly, again, suggest to use NFS because NFS supports hard links, and so you're able to use rsync and profit from the way rsync works and saves backup time and backup space. Which additional features are available? Well, there are a lot of additional features. I just want to talk about the most important features. I already talked about the restore feature and which backup types you can use. And there's one important point I want to mention. This was very important for me when I started to create raspiBackup to save my Raspberries at home. I wanted to be able to restore the backups just by using plain Linux tools. So all the backup data, which then later on is used by raspiBackup to restore the data, is or will be created by raspiBackup by using standard Linux tools. So these tools then later on also can be used to recreate partitions, partition sizes, and so on and so on, and also to create and extract backup data from any backup. Next, messages are written in English and, well, also in German. Default is the configured language on the Raspberries, which usually is English. If you configure your system for another language, let's say French, you will receive English messages because there's only language support for German and English. Next, whenever you create a backup with raspiBackup, you are able to configure raspiBackup to send an email to you, so you get a log of the messages written by raspiBackup, and you also will be able to check the final status of the backup run. Next, whenever you start raspiBackup, it's checked whether there's a new version available of raspiBackup. So whenever a new version is detected, you will get a notification and use raspiBackup with an option to update your local version to the latest available version. I recommend to do this because whenever a new version is available, let's say, well, it's usually between 6 or 9 months. Every 6 and 9 months you will get a new version. There are new features available you can use, and you also can will get any bug fixes which were detected in the meantime. If for some reasons you detect that the new version doesn't work on your system, you can easily restore to the previous version, because every update with raspiBackup just saves the old version and you can go back to the previous one. And in this case, please create an issue in GitHub so I can check why it doesn't work for you anymore and create a fix for this. Next, a lot of people, let's say it this way. Initially, a raspiBackup just created a backup of the running system, and a lot of people were fine with this. But sooner or later, some people experienced some issues when they restored their system. The root cause is actually that they use some databases or some other services or applications which use the memory to keep any information, state information. And the only way to get a consistent backup for these services is to stop these services before creating a backup, and then when the backup finished, start them again. So that's why I inserted or added this feature at some point in time, and you can just configure raspiBackup to do it for you. You just have to define which services to stop, in which sequence, and then later on, when raspiBackup finished the backup process, the services started up again in the reverse order. Configuration of raspiBackup is done primarily in configuration files, but you're able to overwrite all these configuration definitions just by using any command line options. Usually, whenever you start working with raspiBackup, you play with these options, and at the end you find out which options you want to use and then add them in the configuration file, and you don't have to fiddle with all these command line options anymore. There's an installer available which is menu driven, and this installer allows to configure the most important configuration options menu driven, so you then don't have to fiddle with the configuration file. You just start the installer. The installer will ask you for various options which you want to set. You insert any information, let's say for example for the backup path, or you define which day to use for the backup, and then At the end, the installer will update all the configuration files, and you can choose yes, raspiBackup. Another user asked for a feature which I added to raspiBackup, to have some plug points in order to add custom shell scripts which allow to execute any action before the backup and after the backup, just to prepare something and then later on to do some cleanup stuff. It's another nice feature used by a lot of people. Next, there's a sample script available. No, it's not one, and there are a lot of or multiple sample scripts available, which allow to use raspiBackup in more complex scenarios. One of them is a lot of people asked to use pshrink to reduce the size of a DD backup to the minimum size. Pshrink is a nice tool. Just look it up in the net, which just makes sure that the DD backup you created is as small as possible. So there's a script available which calls raspiBackup to create a DD backup, and then at the end calls pshrink to make sure that the image is very, very small. There's another script available which allows to have a more sophisticated backup strategy. Let's call it this way. You can make sure that you have backups of the last 7 days, the last 4 weeks, the last 12 months, and a given number of years of your Raspberry. You just have to create a daily backup, and then all these backups then are kept in the right way. I don't think a lot of people will need this feature, but I think it's a usual feature. So whenever you also think it's usual for you, just use this script and combine raspiBackup with this feature. So where do you find additional information about raspiBackup? There's one main page I will visit right after this section, which allows you to get a lot of information about raspiBackup. The options is the most important part, but also how to decide which backup type to use, and so on and so on. I will talk about this later on. Again, there's raspiBackup on GitHub. It's open source, so you can grab the code, modify it, use it for you. And if you have any new ideas what can or should be done by raspiBackup, create a pull push request, and I will talk to you, and we will decide whether it makes sense to merge the code into the mainstream. In addition, we have a Facebook group which talks about raspiBackup. It's primarily in German, but don't hesitate to post any questions in English. I will answer them, and if you have any, let's say, minor problems, then please you also can discuss them in Facebook. But if they are major issues, then please use GitHub. And finally, you can also use Twitter. It's mostly used by me just to announce a new version, or if there are any serious issues with raspiBackup. Yeah, questions and or issues. Whenever you start to use raspiBackup, you usually have questions, because raspiBackup is, well, I think the first version was published in 2003, so it's a couple of years old, and there are a lot of features already implemented. A lot of users asked for additional features, and I added these features. So raspiBackup is quite flexible and quite powerful in any backup processing. So it's not that easy to configure raspiBackup. So whenever you have any question, well, um, just visit the configuration sample site to get an idea how to configure raspiBackup and which way you can configure raspiBackup, which main options you have to use in order to get what you want to get from raspiBackup. Another very important page is the fact page, the frequent asked questions, because a lot of time I got the same questions and I was bored by by these questions all the time. So I decided to collect all these frequent asked questions on this web page. And there's a high chance whenever you have a question, you will find an answer on this page. Then next, raspiBackup also writes error messages, and these error messages have numbers. And there exists a page which lists error messages with all these with these error messages with these numbers, and you will find the root cause or an explanation of the root cause, and you also will find some guidance how to solve the issue. If there is a message missing, then just let me know and we'll add the message and the root cause and also how to solve the issue. If for some reason you don't find an answer, then please go to GitHub, create the question there as an issue, and I will give you an answer. As an alternative, you also can create a comment on the web page, but the drawback is you will not get any email notification for any updates, which you will get if you use GitHub. And well, so that's why I suggest to use GitHub. You can just register there, it's for free, and don't worry about any cost you will get. Then I already talked about Facebook. Use this one for questions. Don't hesitate to use English, and well, also discuss small problems. Okay, so now I want to continue and visit the most important pages about raspiBackup. Okay, here we are. You can see that's the main page I suggest to visit whenever you want to get any information about raspiBackup. On the left, on the right side, you see a box with the most important links to web pages. First of all, that's the link to the user guide, which well, is a big document, has a lot of information, and please note there's an index at the top, so you will be able to quickly jump to the different sections in the user's guide if you want to get any information. And particularly the invocation syntax and options is a very important part. Here you have all your options explained, and also, well, the invocation options and also the configurations options you have to use in order to control raspiBackup. You have this overview package, which I already showed to you, and a lot of other information and links about raspiBackup. You also have a link to installation and quick start. That's a link you have to follow whenever you want to install raspiBackup. In particular, here in this box you see the commands you have to execute in order to install raspiBackup. That's what I'm going to do in a couple of minutes. I suggest you use copy and paste because it's a long string. Down there you see some sample how the installation looks like, and other advices how to continue configuring raspiBackup and how to continue when you configured raspiBackup. I already talked about the error messages, root cause and fix. That's a page to visit whenever you get an error message. The FAQ I already covered. Configuration example was also covered by me. Whenever you use a Synology and have some issues, please visit this page. I frankly don't have a Synology, but some people using a Synology with raspiBackup had issues and gave me feedback, and I collected that feedback, and you will find hints and tips and tricks how to configure your Synology to use raspiBackup. There's a version history, a credit link, because a lot of people already helped to get raspiBackup to the functionality it has right now. They helped to improve raspiBackup by testing, by suggesting new features, and so on and so on. There are some people who want to donate all the work I am doing with the raspiBackup, so feel free to donate if you feel my work is useful for you. And at the end, there's a link which actually allows you to visit all pages which were created on this website regarding raspiBackup. There's a lot of more pages. I didn't cover all of them. And another nice feature is whenever you have a question about, let's say, Synology, just type in the string on the top right corner, and then you will easily be presented all the pages which talk about Synology in some way, and then you can check whether you find an answer for your question over there. Okay, so now let's go to GitHub. That's the GitHub page. Again, I told you that's the tool I want you to use whenever you have a question about raspiBackup. Ask your question, and I will answer them. You can see there are some questions in German. Well, I allow the German people also to create issues in German, but just feel free to create any issue over there or any questions over here in English, and I will handle them. You can see here on the right side, that's a sign that I'm working on these issues. There are a lot of issues, but actually these are only enhancement issues, and I plan to add these features or enhancements in some of the later versions of raspiBackup. If you have an idea what is missing and should be added to raspiBackup, feel free to create an enhancement request, and we'll talk about this and decide whether it makes sense. And it may be possible I also add this enhancement in a later version. If you want to create an issue, just press the new issue button over here. And if it's a questions, use this button. And if it's problem report, use this one. And then you'll find. If you have a feature request, then, well, just use plain text. Tell me what feature you're actually missing, and we will discuss the feature. Good. And now, last but not least, I will give you a demo, real-time demo, and install raspiBackup on one of my Raspberries. Here we are. So this is the string you actually have to type in when you want to install raspiBackup. Again, just copy and paste the string from the website, because there is a high chance you have a typo in there. Then invoke the installer, which needs an internet connection, otherwise it will not be able to install raspiBackup. You will get an explanation about the keys. Actually, raspiBackup uses the same menu tool like raspiconfig is using, and so you should be familiar with the navigation inside of this installer. Next, you can select the language. well, if you start up the installer, it's just using the default language on the system and supported languages like German and English. So whenever you use a different language, you have to use English. Next step then will be install any components. The first step and the first option is to install raspiBackup, but there's another option to install sample extensions which allow to create additional reports at the end of the backup process. For example, the free space left on the backup device, the backup size, the memory used, and memory free, and so on and so on. I think it's also reporting the CPU temperature. I don't remember it anymore, but yeah, I think it's so. So next step then, as a normal user, is just to install raspiBackup. And now raspiBackup is downloaded. Now go back, and now you can configure the major options. We have the backup path. So that's the mount point you have to use in order to mount your backup partition to receive the backups. I just keep it. Okay, actually, the installer is smart enough to detect whether you have already mounted some backup space on this mount point. And as of now, I don't have anything mounted on there. Because if you now create a backup, the backup will be stored on your SD card, which mostly will fill up your SD card, and then your system will stop to work. So I cannot update it right now. I first have to mount some backup space on the backup path. Then next, the number of backups to keep. This number is used for all backup types, but you're also able to configure these backup numbers for every type, but you have to do it in the configuration file. It's not possible with the installer. Then we have the possibility to select the backup type. Rsync is default. I suggest to use this one, but you're free to select another one. Let's select the DD backup type for now. I already talked about the backup mode. You can select the partition-oriented mode, but I suggest again to use the normal mode, which only saves the two standard partitions. Next, you are able to select which services to stop before the backup process and which services to start. Right now I don't have any database application or something like this up and running on my Raspberry. So let's take, for example, Exim, the mail client, and cron. So I want to stop these two services before the backup is started. In the next panel screen, you can see which services I selected. Now I have to select the services in which sequence they have to be stopped. So first of all, I want to stop Exim. Next, I want to stop cron. In this panel, you can see, okay, again, first of all, it's Exim which is stopped, and next it's cron. I say okay, and now, well, these services are stopped, and in reverse order they are started when the backup finished. There's another option for the message verbosity. I suggest to use the display all if you start working with raspiBackup, because you get a lot of messages and they may help you to locate the root cause for any errors. And then later on, if everything works, then just switch to display only important messages, because all these messages will send in the email and will blow up the size of your email. Email notification. I just said, okay, raspiBackup is able to send an email when it's done. Here you can enter your email address, but if you edit your email address over here, that's not sufficient to receive an email. You have to make sure that you have configured an email client on your Raspberry. Otherwise, well, it doesn't matter whether you edit an email here or not. We also have an option to select compression. Because I selected DD backup, I can select whether the DD backup should be compressed or not. Okay, and now I'm done. I save everything in the configuration file. Well, I get some congratulations, get some additional hints where to look for help if I have any issues. But now I'm done. And now, in my case, first of all, I have to mount a backup space to my backup path, which actually is not there, but if it's mounted already, then I can just call raspiBackup. And then I can test whether a backup will be created. I also should make sure that the restore works, because I have to get familiar with the restore process. I had some people, well, calling me for help because they had a broken Raspberry and were not able to restore their backup. Actually, they had a working backup, but they were so nervous about the failure of their system and whether the restore will work, and didn't remember which steps to execute in which sequence. So I strongly recommend just practice the restore and test whether the restore is okay. So whenever you have to restore your backup, you are familiar with the process and, well, will just need some time, let's say half an hour, and then you're fine with the restore. If everything works and you have tested everything, then call the installer again, because now you have to make sure that raspiBackup is called on a regular base. You do it by configuration, the major options. This is the regular backup. Right now, the installer only supports to install a weekly and to configure a weekly backup. Whenever you want to have a daily or monthly backup, you have to modify the configuration files via an editor. But I think in most of the cases a weekly backup is sufficient. So now you can define the day you want to get a backup, let's say Tuesday. And you also can define the time, let's say 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you just have the installer to update the configuration files. And now you are done. Now, every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, a DD backup will be created on the backup partition mounted on /backup, and you don't have to worry about this process anymore. Whenever your Raspberry fails, just grab the latest backup or a previous backup, depending on your needs, restore it, and you will be able to work with the Raspberry again. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed to get some information in raspiBackup, and I hope you will be able to use raspiBackup to save your Raspberry all the time.